The CCP keeps talking about the Chinese dream, but Chinese people have fallen into a Chinese nightmare. There's no waking up. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. The Chinese Communist Party needs to see a therapist because they're obsessed with the past. Whether it's erasing it, absolutely nothing happened on June 4th, 1989 in Tiananmen Square, I swear, or elevating it with such things as communist landmarks, large military parades to celebrate the victory over Japan in World War II, even though it was actually the Chinese nationalists in the US that did the brunt of the fighting against the Japanese, not the Chinese communists. Don't you hate it when someone in the group project takes all the glory without doing any of the work? Or rave reviews from state-run media about a Terracotta Warriors exhibition in Southern California where towering terracotta warriors with ornate chariots showcase the grandeur of the ancient Chinese civilization. I mean, okay, the terracotta warriors are cool, but really? So why is the CCP so focused on the past? Well, it's actually all about the future. The CCP wants history to help tell a story of Chinese superiority, a story where China was great in the ancient past and therefore is destined to become so again in the near future. After all, history repeats itself, though I don't know if that applies under a regime where they do so much censoring of history. Just ask Chinese leader Xi Jinping, who has said that China will become a dominant world power within 30 years. Seeing China rise to become a preeminent nation on the world stage under communism is Xi Jinping's ultimate goal, his Chinese dream, also known as the Great Rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. In other words, make China great again. In case you were wondering, achieving this rejuvenation is not just Xi's dream, it's the dream of the Chinese people too, Xi tells us. And if the paramount leader himself says it, it must be true. Just look at how the people of China love and respect him and want him to be in charge forever. But while the party state may see pieces of its Chinese dream in relics like the Terracotta Warriors, many Chinese people instead see their Chinese nightmare, which was demonstrated nicely by a Chinese job fair back in March that attracted tens of thousands of mostly young job seekers who flocked around less than 850 potential employers. Unless your dream is waiting in lines, this ain't it, chief. To many, these images of desperate Chinese job seekers crammed together at the fair looked all too similar to the Terracotta Warriors, crammed together in the tomb of the first Chinese emperor. The comparison quickly went viral on Chinese social media, with users leaving thousands of comments such as, "They're both burial pits," "Different armies, same hole," and "LOL, every dynasty has its team of cattle warriors." I wonder if the Terracotta Warriors had to maintain a LinkedIn too. These comments mirror other reactions to life in modern China, where Chinese citizens describe themselves as huminerals to be mined or chives to be harvested, for the sake of fueling an economy from whose benefits they largely feel excluded. At least in the dystopian world of Soylent Green, they had the decency to pretend they weren't chewing people up. To the Chinese people, it feels like the dream is dying. Financial optimism has been declining rapidly in China, and more Chinese people now disagree than agree that hard work pays off. It's so bad that many have simply stopped believing that the economic system works for them. You mean a communist system doesn't work for the people? When has that ever happened every time communism's been tried? As a response, many have decided to turn their back on the system altogether, opting instead for lying flat and letting it rot as alternative low-key lifestyles. And it's all happening in a new era that Chinese people are calling the garbage time of history. Lying flat and rotting in garbage. I can't tell if this is a political movement or my roommate in college. So many people clearly believe that their Chinese dream is dead, which doesn't bode well for the CCP's own Chinese dream, since, it kind of needs China to make it happen. But it wasn't always this way. It wasn't that long ago that studies showed that Chinese optimism was everywhere, and researchers openly wondered how far this optimism would take the Chinese people. Apparently not far. So how did Chinese people go from feeling something like this to asking if Oscar the Grouch needs a roommate? The answer? Communism. Obviously, modern China has never been a place of boundless joy and opportunity for everyone. Even during the most optimistic of times, there have been sharp divides between haves and have-nots in China. Those with connections to CCP officials have always had a better shot in life than those that didn't, though they also had a better shot at actually getting shot. And things like China's household residential system, known as hukou, gave special rights and services to urban people, excluding rural folk. And of course, it became clear early on that even though other authoritarian regimes were willing to combine development with democratization in the 1980s and 1990s, the CCP had no intention of doing so, as evidenced by a great big nothing that never happened. With all that being said, many Chinese people did prosper after the communist leadership started opening up the economy in the 1970s and 80s, which was desperately needed after the decades of destruction, economic mismanagement, and international isolation under Chinese leader Mao Zedong. The change was eventually supercharged by the arrival of Western companies that wanted to benefit from China's morality and innovation. And of course, by that, I mean seemingly endless supply of cheap labor. Many of them also hoped to one day profit from China's potentially vast consumer market. During those years, it suddenly became a glorious Chinese socialist policy to get rich. Let some people get rich first, then Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping reportedly said back in those days. And many did. Even people with little education from poor backgrounds were able to ride the surge of development to become members of China's growing cohort of millionaires. But over the years, the ride to the top has become a lot harder and bumpier. Some of this is due to natural causes. Obviously, in the early days, there was a lot more space to grow since many industries and sectors simply didn't exist in China. Today, decades later, the scene has gotten a lot more crowded, though it's hard to see thanks to the smog from just how much industry there is. At this point, many Chinese sectors and industries are crammed to the gills with businesses and are now struggling with an overcapacity problem. More Chinese people today are also better educated and more qualified than before, creating intense competition for those trying to make it. All of this has led to a high youth unemployment rate and a situation where overqualified young Chinese people find themselves taking jobs as drivers, laborers, and film extras. But on top of these natural processes, there are the unnatural ones that have made everything much, much worse. The CCP didn't have to impose some of the world's most draconian COVID lockdowns on the Chinese people during the pandemic, but they did. Forget returning to prosperity. The real story of the CCP is they didn't have to do it, but they did. And it pushed both Chinese people and the Chinese economy to the brink. Since then, Chinese people have refused to spend, choosing instead to save in case bad times return. And with their government, it's not really in case so much as when. The low consumer spending is hindering China's economy, creating tougher conditions for those already finding their Chinese dream difficult to reach. It doesn't help either that during the COVID years, the Chinese government came down hard on some of China's most profitable industries, cracking down on everything from education to the tech world and the financial sector. The campaign against education alone put over 3 million jobs at risk, adding unnecessary hardship and resentment. I know, shocking that a country obsessed with censoring history isn't a fan of people learning how to think critically. Adding to the Chinese people's frustrations, there has recently been an endless stream of scandals exposing how Nepo babies with connections and resources are able to get ahead unfairly in today's Chinese system, while ordinary Chinese people toil for long hours and low pay with little to show for it. At the same time, it's become more difficult to turn to foreign companies for better opportunities, since even before the increased trade tensions between China and the West, foreign direct investment into China has collapsed, as foreign companies feel less welcomed in China thanks to new laws. Many of these companies have also had to abandon their own Chinese dreams as they're being squeezed out of the market by local companies that are better connected and subsidized by the state. So overall, it's no wonder that many Chinese people feel disillusioned and have abandoned the Chinese dream that came easier to others in previous years. At the same time, The government has changed its messaging. Long gone are the days when Chinese leaders would encourage people to get rich. Instead, Xi has been telling Chinese people to struggle and eat bitterness instead. They went from get rich or die trying to just die trying. The rhetoric has gotten so gloomy that it's been described as the end of optimism in China, which means it's a great time to be a pessimist, though pessimists probably wouldn't agree. But while all that might sound like the definitive end of the Chinese dream, that's not the case for Xi. Xi knows that only through struggle can China truly achieve national rejuvenation. After all, at its core, isn't that what communism is all about? Endless struggle? And for Xi, achieving the Chinese dream is all about making sure that Chinese people that are fed up with the Chinese system struggle harder for that very system. Why should they do that? Well, because he's urging them to. Who's a good Soylent Green? Yes, you are. Yes, you are. After all, just because Chinese people are giving up on their Chinese dream doesn't mean that they should stop working hard so Xi, at least, can achieve his Chinese dream. There is just maybe the tiny issue that maybe not everyone at the bottom is super stoked about struggling just so the top can reap all the rewards. So it might be worth it for Xi to consider throwing the people a bone once in a while. Otherwise, when the time comes for Emperor Xi to have his tomb built and filled with terracotta warriors, there might not be any Chinese people showing up to do the necessary struggling. But if you want to really know just how bad the CCP is, consider this. Even the Taliban doesn't like them. Click here for an exclusive episode on the ChinaUncensored.tv website about that. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.